Actually, I'm Scotch-Irish, but there we go. This will be fun. That way I move around. Yeah, don't watch this if you're real satisfied with the way things are going, but I don't think you are. Okay, I got a long way to go, a short time to get there. So let me find out how we move this thing along. There we go. Population control. How corporate owners are killing us. Folks, this is really important. Some of you have heard me before talk about UFOs, talk about Kennedy assassination, talk about 9/11, and all this is important, okay? But what I'm going to talk to you about today is self-defense. Okay, this goes beyond philosophies, goes beyond politics. There are people out there running these global corporations, and they want you dead. All right, and they're working towards it, so we need to figure out who's doing that and how. First off, as we know, and this isn't any big surprise, we're now the corporate world, okay? And the corporations run everything. It's really kind of interesting because the very definition of fascism is the combination of state and corporate power, okay? In Nazi Germany and fascist Italy, the state gained control over the corporations, and it was that combination that resulted in fascism. In the United States today, we've kind of done the opposite. The corporations have gained control over the state, but the end result's the same, fascism. And we need to be aware of that. So, in 1952, corporations accounted for 32% of the federal tax revenues. By 2013, this was less than 10%. So what we have here actually is corporate welfare. You know, they are pushing this socialist state on us, and yet under socialism, you know, it's supposed to be power to the people. Everybody, you work, and you know, you get receive for however much you put in, yada yada. But hey, today the money is all flowing upwards, and it's going into the pockets of the corporation. It's absolutely incredible. It used to be bad, now it's worse. And the main reason you never hear about all this is because there are now 5 major corporations that control everything you see and hear. And I'm not just talking about news. I'm talking about movies, records, billboards, book clubs, satellite, you name it. And it's all under tight control, and these corporations are in turn controlled by interlocking directorships and ownerships. So actually you have a small handful of people that can control everything you see and hear. This is why your neighbors just don't get it, okay? Because they watch TV. Now, to show you that that's not just some conspiracy theory, 2011 there was a study done by the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, and they analyzed 43,000 multinational corporations. They found they were essentially controlled by 1,318 companies with interlocking ownerships, and these in turn were pretty much controlled by about 147 interlocking firms that collectively controlled more than 60% of total global revenues, okay? And these 147 interlocking firms then were pretty much under the control of 20 banks. All right, now this is the control. Now, as you can see, this is incredible, concentrated control. One of my heroes that has remained on my hero list, even though he's imperfect, okay, is, of course, Thomas Jefferson. He said, if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and the corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. The issuing power should be taken from the private banks, restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. Amen, brother. That's exactly where the problem is. Yep. And this was Thomas Jefferson. This is way the heck back there, you know. And of course, they fought the central bank all through the history of the United States. Finally, it was put to rest about 1830 by Andrew Jackson, who called those private bankers a den of thieves, okay? And it was since 1830 and up through until about 1913 that this country really prospered. And then in 1913, by hook and crook, and by their own definition, a conspiracy, they ran in the Federal Reserve System on us, which is neither federal nor does it have any reserves. Okay, and it is a collection of private banks, which in turn are owned by other banks, which in turn are owned by stockholders, many of whom are not even American citizens. Now, have you wondered why we're in such shape we are? In fact, if you'll think about it, let me quickly tell you not only the biggest conspiracy going on, but the proof of conspiracy. Right now, while we're all sitting here in this nice hotel enjoying the ambiance and the good food and the good companionship, we kind of know that we have the technological capability today, off the shelf, not just futuristic stuff. I mean, it's available right now. We could feed, clothe, house, and give probably basic medical care to every single living person on this planet. We know we've got the capability. But yet, even as we sit here, we don't like to think about this, but if you'll think about it, in the back of your mind, we know that right now, while we're sitting here, there are literally thousands, if not millions, of children starving to death on this planet. Why is it that way? I doubt anyone in this room wants it that way. I don't want it that way. So why is it that way? Well, it's that way because once you get past the facile rationalizations, oh, well, it's money and it's politics and it's transportation. Nah, all that can be taken care of. It's that way, folks, because somewhere somebody wants it that way. If nobody wanted it that way, it wouldn't be that way. And I might extrapolate that on up to our situation here in the United States of America. We still have a very rich country. We are rich in minerals, we are rich in uranium, we're rich in gas and oil, we're rich in coal. We have all kinds of wealthy material goods here in this country. And we have a reasonably intelligent workforce that really wants to work. The average person they just simply would like to have a nice job, something they can feel good about, make enough money to get along and get their family along. That's it. We got the workforce, we've got the wealth. Why is this country in such dire financial straits? Why do we owe, by official counts, more than $20 trillion? And unofficially, it's probably a whole lot more than that because they're not counting that derivative bubble and all the other problems we have. Why is it that way? Well, again, because what I'll tell you is because somebody wants it that way. If nobody wanted it that way, it wouldn't be that way. Now, the way they handle this is various ways. Briefly, I'm going to hit quickly on this, but you need to look into the Financial Stability Board. This was originally the Financial Stability Committee of the Bank for International Settlements. And if you've read my book, The Rise of the Fourth Reich, you realize that the Bank of International Settlements, the BIS, was created by and for the Nazis and continued to operate all through World War II, hoarding money, passing money, dealing with money from all of the belligerent nations. The war didn't have anything to do with them. And in 2009, President Obama at G20 signed us up for this Financial Stability Board, which is supposed to be standardizing the finances of the world economy. So essentially what he did is our economic policy now in the United States is in the hands of the international bankers. And we're going to be in big trouble here because, as we've already seen beginning to happen in Greece, Ireland, a few other places, the banks are now still toppling, all right? But there's a big difference. In 2008, they managed to get TARP money, the tax money, your money, to prop up those failing banks. Well, then they passed Dodd-Frank, and everybody went, yay, because here's a law that says you cannot use tax money to prop up a failing bank. Sounded good on the surface. But what this means is that the banks, which are still continuing to fail, are now have to go and try to figure out where they're going to get money, and they're going to get it from unsecured loans. That means your checking account, your savings account, okay? And you have to understand when you give your money to a bank, it's not your money anymore. Legally, technically, they say it now belongs to the bank. So what they're doing in some of these other countries that are having such problems is if you have $100 in the bank, they're going to say, well, I'm sorry, but we're having financial problems and we've spent your $100, but here, you have $100 worth of stock in our bank. Well, great. Now, stop and think about it. What's going to happen when they start going to negative interest rates and they start charging you for holding your money in the bank? They're already doing that, by the way. You realize when you give your money to a bank, they don't just stick it away in a safe deposit box and hold it for you. They use your money to make money. They loan it to other people, okay? If you put $100 in the bank under fractional banking, they can loan up to $10,000 because your 100 is what counts as their backing. And then when they get that $10,000 back at, say, 20% interest, you know, do you get the interest? No. And this is why years ago, after I figured this out, I banked with a little small state bank there in Texas, and I know the people that are running it. And years ago, I told the bank president, I said, let me tell you something. I said, I understand your game. I said, I'm not wild about you making money off my money. I said, but you do offer this safe, and, you know, you got guards, and you got, you know, this big building, and so I understand that you probably need to make something for taking care of my money. And I said, so if you're going to go out and make money on my money, I said, I don't like it, but I guess I can live with that. I said, but I'll be damned if I'm going to pay you for the privilege of earning money off my money. I said, so don't ever try to charge me some service charge. And they don't. Okay? And if everybody would go tell them the same thing, maybe we could cut down on some of this. But I don't have to tell you all. Think what happens. Every month you get your bank statement, there's always a little something else in there. Oh, usage, transfer fee, blah, blah, blah. They got 100 of them, okay? And this has just got to stop. Financial Stability Board. The other thing you have to watch out for is the Exchange Stabilization Fund. This is one you've never heard about, but it's a little known office of the Treasury that was actually begun back in the 1930s during the Depression as a means of transferring gold between the United States and other countries. But it controls the New York Federal Reserve Bank, which dominates the Federal Reserve System. If the New York Federal Reserve says, we're going to do this, everybody else follows in line. It also handles the CIA's black budget. Has been mixed up in everything from drug trafficking to Iran-Contra, and even by some accounts mixed up in the Kennedy assassination. It is the architect of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, the two leading institutions which are robbing us and taking our money. So now we see that it's money and it's power, and we now have the Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act, National Defense Authorization Act. By the way, under the National Defense Authorization Act, that says the government can take control over our food, over gasoline, over transportation, over everything. One of the provisions is that the federal government can take control of all the water. Guess who, under this National Defense Authorization Act, guess who is in charge of all the water in this country except packaged, bottled corporate water? Of course, they sell and they don't have to take care of it. But if you have a well, or if you have a stream by your house, or if you're getting rain runoff off your roof and have a little barrel or whatever, guess who's in charge of all that? The Secretary of Defense. Whoa. Now, why? Yeah, let them come clean them out. It all comes back to the idea that the people who want to run the show think there's just too damn many of us. And this goes back to the eugenics program, which was begun back in the late 1800s. And interestingly enough, it didn't start in Germany. It started here in the United States. And this chart right here, you can see this chart was in 1939. And the majority of the states, all the states with the cross-hatching, these are states that had sterilization laws on the book. If you didn't measure up to their idea of a good human, height, weight, ethnicity, skin color, etc., then you were at risk of involuntary sterilization. Now, it got carried to the extreme over in Germany because they got hold of the eugenics movement and said, hey, it's pretty good. You know, let's clean up the race. Let's create a master race. And of course, we all know how that turned out. And so eugenics kind of, the term fell into ill repute. But it was all about cleaning up the dirty gene pool, okay? Margaret Sanger, who founded Planned Parenthood, is quoted as saying, colored people are like human weeds, need to be exterminated. And don't think that that is all gone out of fashion, because Hillary Clinton says, I admire Margaret Sanger, her courage, her tenacity, her vision. So yeah, it's still going on. We know about the scandal over Planned Parenthood where they were selling the fetus body parts. That's still ongoing. And what I found interesting is the guy who went into these clinics with a hidden camera and got it on tape and put it up on the internet so we could see what was actually going on. He's the one that's now in jail for illegally taping somebody, see. Oh, man. So, population control is nothing new. It goes back to eugenics and it comes forward, and they are using various methods. We see the chemtrails. This is barium, aluminum oxide, all kinds of things they're putting in the air, and we're breathing it. And don't think that you all are exempt, because coming up here yesterday, I'm looking out the plane window, and here's the cross-hatching chemtrails all over Philadelphia. Fluoridation, putting fluoride in the water, a little more on that later. Vaccines. I want everybody to understand I am not totally anti-vaccine. I think vaccines can be very helpful, but I think it's gotten out of hand, and we need to demand more accountability for what they're putting in the vaccines. We know they're putting mercury in there, and when they're putting aluminum, and it's causing a problem. Some of you are probably aware of the little hoorah over that the film that Robert De Niro was forced to cancel at a film festival. Well, good for Robert. He finally got some cojones, and now he was on a national talk show, and he said, you know, I shouldn't have done that. There's question. We should have open dialogue and open discourse on the idea of vaccinations, and he encouraged everybody to go see that movie.
He said he was going to release it on YouTube, did he? You know?
He said what?
He said he was going to release it on YouTube.
Oh, cool. He said he's going to release it on YouTube. Well, everybody watch it, and also you'll read all of this in my new book, Population Control. There was a Dr. Thompson who worked for the CDC and was involved for several years with their studies on the connection between autism and the vaccines. And he said, yes, I feel bad because we covered it all up. So this is really terrible. It all comes back to the idea that there's too many people, you know. And some of you guys that live in Philadelphia, for example, and you have to wade your way through traffic every day, it's very easy to say, yeah, it's just too many people. We need to cut down on this. And of course, we've got the Georgia Guidestones, where the very first admonition is maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Oh, doesn't that sound warm and fuzzy? We all like that, okay? And actually, that might be real nice, except for the fact that there are now 7.5 billion of us on this world. And this leads me to the burning question. What are if they reduce the population to 500 million, what are they going to do with the other 7 billion of us? And more importantly, who's going to decide what happens to the other 7 billion of us? And that's where we start running into problems. Let's look what the globalists have to say. Jacques Cousteau says, reduce the population by encouraging abortion and sterilization. He's all for it. General Maxwell Taylor, you know, who is our ambassador to Vietnam, and he's the one, I believe, that when Reagan was shot, came on TV and said, I'm in charge here, and kind of let the cat out of the bag. He says that it'll be necessary to reduce the world's population, mostly in third world countries, using methods such as disease, starvation, regional wars. He concluded, I've already written off more than 1 billion people. Population crisis and the food supply question dictate that we should not even try. It's a waste of time. And we hear Henry Kissinger says depopulation should be the highest priority of U.S. foreign policy. The globalists all agree we got to cut down on the population. And don't think that that's just people on the fringe. Here we see with President Obama, his science czar, John Holdren, who years ago published this book, Echo Science, in which he said that many of my colleagues feel that some sort of compulsory birth control regulation will be necessary to achieve control over population growth. One plan often mentioned involves the addition of temporary sterilants to water supplies or staple food. Doses of the antidote would be carefully rationed by the government to produce the desired population effect, okay? So if you know somebody or you got a lot of money or whatever, then see, you might get the antidote. It's absolutely incredible. Now, Prince Philip is a good example. He's the consummate globalist. Member of the royal family. He goes to the Bilderberg meetings, you know, and he says human population growth is probably the single most serious long-term threat to survival. If it isn't controlled voluntarily, it will be controlled involuntarily by an increase in disease, starvation, and war. And just to show you how serious he is,